I really wasn't sure when I walked into Bible study on Tuesday morning what the focal point of my sermon was going to be this week. I had two strong, serious candidates and one rather playful. The rather playful one is based on the Galatians passage and the whole armor of God. So you see, several years ago, I came across something on the internet, and once seen, you cannot unsee it. It was an ad for Armor of God PJs. Google it and enjoy. The absurdity of pajamas protecting. I understand blankets protect you from the monsters in the room. I got that. I remember that from a kid. But at any rate, so we're stuck with either another sermon on bread, because this will be the fifth one in 5 weeks. By the way, you'll be happy to know this is the end of the bread sermons in John. We're back to Mark next week. And that. Now, this is an important teaching. It's the essence of the Eucharistic theology in John's gospel. And in all seriousness, it is very important. For John's Last Supper doesn't have an institution of the Eucharist. We get it, what the Eucharist means here. For in John, the Last Supper is the giving of a final commandment, the one to love one another as Jesus has loved us. And that is certainly merits some examination. But the energy on Tuesday morning seemed to be around this First Kings passage and Solomon's prayer at the dedication of the new temple. So that's where we're going to go with. Again, an important character in this passage and throughout the history of the Israelites is the Ark of the Covenant. That ark, that container that had the tablets of Moses with the Ten Commandments. All through the history of the Old Testament, we see the ark used as a symbol of the presence of God with the people of Israel. In today's reading, the ark is brought into the temple and placed in a special room, the Holy of Holies, and hidden behind a curtain. In the second temple, it was still hidden behind a curtain, and that is the curtain that is torn when Jesus is crucified. So this is an important piece. But in the early days of the Israelites, God traveled with the people of Israel and came to meet Moses at the ark that was inside a tent. Only Moses could enter. In Solomon's temple and in the second temple of Herod, only the high priest could enter that room. So they started that tradition early. But this week, we hear about the ark being placed in the temple for the first time, and Solomon at prayer, as we heard last week. This prayer is the real focus of the story, and the theology about God that is presented is a little different from what had been up until that point. Remember, I said that Hebrew scriptures are more about the development of the theology and relationship between God and the people of Israel than a literal history of what happened back then. And it is the theology that is important today. What we hear today was written not in the time of Solomon, by the way, but it was written by the Deuteronomistic writers during the Babylon exile, some 600 years after Solomon. God confined to a temple is a problem for them, since they're in Babylon because the Babylonians destroyed the temple in God's house and took all of the leadership and much of the population. Babylon. So where's God? Listen to how they answer this. The presence of God is described in chapters 10 or verses 10 through 12. And when the priest came out of the holy place, a cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priest could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord. It is not God who fills the temple, but the glory that overpowers the priest. God is too big for the temple. God cannot be contained in a tent, a box, or a room. This is a new idea to the people of Israel. This prayer is rich in the language of Solomon as the son of the great King David. And there's a lot to focus on the covenant that God made with David and that continued with Solomon as his son. But then the first of two critical ideas shows up in verse 27. But will God indeed dwell on the earth? Even heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you, much less this house that I have built. Regard your servant's prayer and his plea, O Lord my God, heeding the cry and prayer that your servant prays to you today, that your eyes may be open night and day towards this house, the place in which you say, my name shall be there, that you may heed the prayer that your servant prays toward this place. Hear the plea of your servant and of your people Israel when they pray towards this place. O hear in heaven, your dwelling place, heed and forgive. The D writer, through Solomon's word, is creating an image of God so much larger, so much more expansive than the previous image. Heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain God. No house built by humans can contain God. God is no longer the small tribal God that travels around with the Israelites and comes to sit and talk in a tent with along with the ark. Only a glimpse of God and God's immensity and transcendence is present in the temple. This is a major shift in theological understanding of God. This is a God who cannot be contained in any one place by any one people. This is the God of the universe as they knew it and as we know it. This is God uses the temple as a way to make God's self known to the people, and God's presence is there, but God is also everywhere. Then we came to the part that generated a good bit of discussion, and the point I really want to get around to, and that's verses 41 to 43. So now we have an image of God that transcends the world. Likewise, when a foreigner who is not one of your people Israel comes from a distant land because of your name, for they shall hear of your great name, your mighty hand, and your outstretched arm. When a foreigner comes and prays toward this house, then hear in heaven your dwelling place, and do according to all that the foreigner calls to you, so that all the peoples of the earth may know your name and fear you, as do your people Israel. And so that they may know that your name has been invoked in this house that I have built. The temple is established so others, foreigners, may come and learn of God. Something that many people misunderstand, as did some of the Israelites, is this concept of being the chosen people. Israelites, the Jews, were chosen and are chosen, not because they are special or better than others. The nation of Israel is chosen by God to make God known to the world. That's what being the chosen people means. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. I learned this from a conservative rabbi in Virginia Beach at an interfaith dialogue we were having. And he said, I still to this day have a problem convincing my congregation that their primary job is to make God known, not to come and just sit in here on Saturday mornings and feel good. They're called to welcome the foreigner into their temple, their world, so that all who come seeking God may find God and know God. All through the Hebrew Scriptures, there is a strong message of welcoming the foreigner, helping them, because in those days anyone might find themselves in the wilderness in need of help from those not like them. This was the cold of the desert and an important principle for the nation. Jesus, as a Jew, knew this and taught it, often quoting the Hebrew Scriptures to his disciples and those to whom he was teaching. I'm currently reading a book about Jesus as a Jew and how his Jewish heritage influenced his teaching and life. It's written by a theologian by the name of Amy Jill Levine, a Jewish New Testament theologian. So she brings a different view to it. And she's constantly making the point that Jesus was calling the Jewish world back into their heritage. He was not issuing new commandments, but calling to follow the teachings that were already there and to interpret them as laws of love. What got the Tuesday morning group talking was the idea of our call to be chosen people, chosen to make God known to our world. One of the shortest mission statements of Christian churches, and it's a common one, to know Christ and to make Christ known. Now, our mission statement is a little longer than that because it talks about our specific call as a parish. But the greater call to all Christian churches, all churches, is to know Christ and make Christ known. That's our job. Now, some will choose to listen. Many will not. The opposition we face today isn't that much different than what Jesus and the early church faced. Teaching a religion of love, sacrifice, fellowship, forgiveness, and yes, radical welcome is a tough sell in today's world. And now notice I use the word radical welcome. I've used this a couple other times, and I wanted to focus on this for my final points this morning. I was ordained in Massachusetts with the Reverend Stephanie Spillers, who is now on Bishop Curry's national staff. While here in Massachusetts, she wrote a book entitled Radical Welcome. Some of the vestry members will remember hearing me talk about this. A church that lives radical welcome is one that is more than just inclusive. There are churches that invite everyone to come in, but then demand they become like them. They operate like the Board Collective, where everyone is assimilated and must change to fit in the box of that particular church. Inclusive churches welcome in and respect their differences, but a radically welcoming church welcomes all and invites them to contribute their unique gifts to the church, and the church changes and it is enriched by those gifts. This is a challenging church, and there are very few churches of this latter character. And the vast majority of churches actually demand that everyone who comes in the door becomes like them, or they are no longer welcome and are shown their way back out that door. How do I know this? I've talked to an awful lot of LGBT people who've come. Many have been welcomed into a church only to find that the church wants to fix them, to change them, to demand that they deny an important part of their humanity. It is not unusual for me to be asked by someone hurt by a church in the past, and it can be for any of a variety of reasons, if they are truly welcome, just as they are. My answer is a resounding yes, you are welcome. I vividly remember one day I was out on a lawnmower at St. Aidan's in Virginia Beach, and I was right by the sign. You know that sign you see every so often says, the Episcopal Church welcomes you? The guy pulled up, rolled down, now see I'm showing my age, rolled down the window, and said, do you mean it? I said, what? He said, the sign. Do you mean it? And I said, yes, we do. He said, what time is your church service? I said, 10:30. He said, I'll see you. He's still a member of that church today because he found out that that church meant it. And I am sure if that person walked in this door today, they would find out that y'all mean it too, because you are a church that welcomes all. And that's so important. Welcoming all into the church is exactly what Solomon was talking about in his prayer some 3,000 years ago. It's as relevant and important today as it was then. Every so often, I use an invitation to communion. I used it a couple months ago, but I'm going to use it today again. And I want you to listen to how this welcomes people in and welcomes people up to the railing. He was always the guest. In the homes of Peter and Jairus, Martha and Mary, Joanna and Susanna, he was always the guest. At the meal tables of the wealthy, where he pled the case of the poor, he was always the guest. Upsetting polite company, befriending isolated people, welcoming the stranger. He was always the guest. But here at this table, he is the host. Those who wish to serve him must first be served by him. Those who want to follow him must first be fed by him. For this is the table where God intends us to be nourished. This is the time when Christ can make us new. So come, you who hunger and thirst for a deeper faith, a better life, a fairer world. Jesus, who sat at our tables, now invites us to be guests at his. This is an invitation to all to come to this table, to this rail, and receive the body and blood of Christ that John is teaching us about. To taste and see that the Lord is good.
I got it.